I read a fundamentalist evangelical Christian nationalist book where evil leftists control the weather. No, I'm not joking. Let's talk about it. Hi, my name's Rachel, and today we're talking about Defier by Mandy Fender, whose name sounds like Man Defender, and if I were her, I would have chosen a pen name, but here we are. This book has a full title called Defier the Girl Who Stood, and from that title alone, I think you can guess that one of the things that we're going to talk about today is one of my favorite subjects, which is Christian persecution complex, a social phenomenon that I grew up enmeshed in. This idea tends to come out in every single solitary piece of media written by evangelical Christians in the United States, where fundies believe that if the US is not a Christian nation where laws are being made based on their fundamentalist values and views of the Bible, that means that anyone who disagrees with them is going to burn Bibles. I don't know how we jumped from here to there, but okay. And force them to deny their faith, and that they must put on the full armor of God and defend the Christian nation version of the United States that they have fabricated against an enemy who they have also made up. I shit you not, I wrote that joke before doing research for this video, where I found out that this author also has another book that is a children's picture book about putting on the full armor of God. Now, I personally left Fundyland almost a decade ago, so while I no longer put on the full armor of God, I do carry something armor-like on me at all times, and that is my wallet from Ridge, who is the sponsor of today's video. Some of their wallets can take a bullet. I'm not being hyperbolic. Ridge has improved my life with their wallets and their key cases. This is my wallet, and it just literally magnetically attaches to my phone. Isn't that adorable? And extremely convenient for me. Just magnetically just slaps right on there. Their wallets are slim, customizable, made with premium materials, including RFID blocking materials to keep your personal information safe and secure. Ridge wallets easily fit into your front pockets and can hold up to 12 cards and still have room for cash with a cash strap or money clip. Me and my mom both like the cash strap personally. Carlos and my brother both use the money clip. That's what's so great about them being customizable. The Ridge key case easily fits into your pockets to help ensure your keys are always on you without being a bulky distraction. Have you ever been stabbed in your own leg by your own keys? Me too, but that doesn't happen to me anymore with Ridge key cases, which have been a gift to my life. I love Ridge so much that I have hooked up everybody in my family with Ridge wallets. Yes, literally everybody. And then I also hooked up Carlos's entire work family as well. So if you're worried about gift giving this holiday season, Ridge is making it easier to put on the full armor of Ridge. Whether you're treating yourself or someone you love or just your husband's favorite coworkers, Ridge has deals going that make it the perfect time to upgrade your armor and your everyday essentials with a variety of products, so you can find the right Ridge wallet or key case or even luggage for yourself or somebody that you care about. That luggage is the best. Carlos and I have traveled this year in 5 different states with it in tow, so it has really gotten a lot of use and has held up so perfectly. Join me in putting on the full armor of Ridge. Their holiday sale is still running. You can get up to 40% off by going to ridge.com/readswithrachel or click the link down below. Last chance shipping ends soon, so buy now to get that last minute gift just in time for Christmas at ridge.com/readswithrachel. And thank you so much to Ridge for sponsoring today's video. So a few notes before we get into this book, Defier, today. Why did I read this? Great question. So recently, a patron of mine had requested specifically that I review this book, which I did. The full video is available now. And I had gotten a comment from somebody on that video who said that I went out of my way to find that book to review it and just shit on it because it's written by a Christian. The biggest pet peeve that I have is when I'm accused of doing something that I did not do. I will go out of my way to tell you how not correct you are. But then I got really mad because I was very specifically not talking about Christian broadly. I was talking about a sect of Christianity that is cult adjacent that I grew up in. My father, he worked for very popular evangelical pastors. I'm talking, my father worked directly under Jimmy Swaggart. And if you are familiar with Fundyland at all, you know who Jimmy Swaggart is. And my dad also worked for Rod Parsley. My dad traveled all over the world with extremely popular pastors. My family is evangelical fundamentalist. This is a very particular sect of Christianity that has done quite a lot of harm and also has gotten greatly enmeshed in the politics of the United States and tries to enact its will onto the population despite a lot of the population not wanting to live by that. So this is not me shitting on Christians. I read books by Christians. I do not have a problem with Christians broadly broadly. Some authors that I've read from whose books I've liked are Rebecca Ross's Sisters of Sword and Song. If you want to talk about like nonfiction, I really appreciated I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness by Austin Channing Brown, who talks about her experiences as a Black woman, but particularly she is a Christian and talking about her experiences as a Black woman who is a Christian. That was one of my favorite nonfiction books of all time. And then I also really like Matt Michaelados's writing. My problem is with ideologies that are harmful, and I know they are harmful because they harmed me, or I took part in utilizing them to harm others, which I now deeply regret. I grew up in this sect of this particular religious belief, and I didn't leave it until I was in my 20s. So I think that that grants me the right to talk about it as much as I want to, and I'm not going to be told, you're just being mean to Christians. That's not happening. Don't accuse me of things I don't do. I don't like it. I get really aggressive when you do that. I sat with that comment and I got more and more frustrated about it, and I was like, you know what? Donald Trump won the election. He is appointing fundamentalist evangelicals to his cabinet. There has never been more of a time that evangelicals need to be called out for their horrible ideas that actively harm people than now. In fact, I think it's my responsibility to do so, to sort of like counteract the harm that I did as an evangelical. No, I didn't go out of my way to pick that book to review in that video, but if I'm gonna get accused of something, I might as well fucking do it. So I went out of my way to find another Christian book and see if it, was same shit, different day. Now, originally I was gonna review a Christian dark romance, which yes, that exists. There's not much of it, but it exists. But I started one and I just wasn't like feeling like I wanted to review that particular one. So the same person I saw on TikTok, a Christian person who is talking about both dark romance and other genres, they were like, I also, want to talk about this book, and I saw Defier. They mentioned Defier, and I was like, okay, well, I was going to do Christian dark romance, but you know what? If I'm going to get accused of talking about Christian dystopian on purpose, then I might as well just fucking read it on purpose. So I read it on purpose. Now, I don't know what's in here. I didn't look up the author before reading. I just saw a Christian recommend a book that was dystopian, and I said, let's see if it's the same as the last Christian dystopian I read. They don't have to be evangelical fundamentalist views. They could be written more like Matt Michaelados's writing, but no. Fundies are just everywhere, constantly writing dystopian. And another thing I want to talk about real quick before we dive into the book, which is legitimately bad. Christian media that is fundamentalist media is often just really poor in quality. And that is often because of the intention behind it, especially when it is written by Christian adults for teens. I can give you I have reviewed so many examples of this. Frank Peretti's writing, Jesse Manassian's writing, Laura Gallier, Marissa Schrock. All of these people are writing books for Christian teens that end up feeling very unnatural, robotic, and often like inhuman. And this is often because mostly of authorial intent, but also there's like a lot of limitations to what they can do in their books. And also there's the issue of they are so disconnected from teenagers because they see teenagers as clay with which they need to mold into adults to be just like them. There's a Bible verse that says, train up a child the way they should go, and when they are older, they will not depart from it. And that's what they're trying to do with Christian fiction. They are using it as a medium with which to mold these young humans instead of just treating them as humans. So often what you will see in Christian storytelling, and certainly in this book, in the last Christian dystopian book I read, is this very robotic tone that lacks any sort of emotional depth and a tendency to prioritize moral lessons over character development or storytelling. And that is certainly the case for today's book. Christian evangelical authors are often writing for a teen audience to deliver clear moral instruction based on biblical values. And this very often comes at the expense of natural character development, natural character dialogue, and character complexity, because they don't see teens as complex humans, they see teens as clay. So the result is this narrative that reads like a sermon, and it often gets like a sermon, very stuck in its cadence and very repetitive. If you've ever been to an evangelical church, you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes teenagers will make fun of the adults who speak at church because we get so used to their cadence. And in fact, if you've ever been to a church that speaks in tongues, there is always that one guy who is always, filled with the Holy Spirit and speaks in tongues, and he says things speaking in tongues the same way every time. And so you start to, maybe this was just my church, but you start to like make fun of him when you're in youth group, and then you get yelled at by your youth group leaders for making fun of somebody who's filled with the Spirit. So Christian fiction written by evangelical adults for teens teens will portray characters who, while technically like struggling with real life challenges, ultimately find resolution to their life challenges with these very overly simplistic answers, and the answer is always Jesus. So the dialogue and the narrative throughout always feels preachy, overly simplistic, stilted, super idealistic on behalf of the main character, and incredibly lacking in emotional depth from all characters. But like specifically with the villains, your understanding of them is that they are just bad for the sake of being bad. Christian fiction in books for teens often features characters who embody these idealized virtues, right? They are this teen whose biggest struggle is a lack of faith, and you want to, because teenagers do struggle with that, and you want to fix that lack of faith and tell them how to feel about it before they become an adult, so they have these things to fall back on. So their protagonists are often these like nearly perfect children with few flaws, few internal conflicts that when they need to be resolved can easily be resolved through faith or divine intervention. So teen readers who are often navigating these very complex things in their lives with very little resources, especially if you're growing up in Fundyland, many of them will struggle to connect with these stories on an emotional level, but they don't know that that's even possible because this is the only kind of media that we get when we grow up in Fundyland. This lack of imperfection can make us feel like media that I'm consuming does not mirror me. I'm so awful that there's not even media that mirrors me. Nobody else, obviously, then, is dealing with these things that I'm dealing with. I'm alone in this. And then you live with this great sense of shame. So teen Christian readers feel like they are presented with this idealized image of what they should be rather than an authentic portrayal of how faith can be involved with what is a very messy life. And then going back to the other issue is that authors write robotic Christian fiction for teens because they don't really have a complete understanding of the teenage experience anymore. I mean, I'm even experiencing this myself. I'm getting so much further and further away from being a teenager that I'm forgetting what it was like to feel like that. So adult authors try their best to capture the voice of their younger audience, but there's this complete disconnect between how teens speak, behave, etc. So for instance, in this book, we are talking about these two teens who are a boy and a girl who have like a light attraction to each other, and this never comes up despite the fact that they end up living in the same house together and they go on a trip together where they are alone. And the author sidesteps the fact that there are feelings between them and just ignores this altogether. But as a person who, once was 18, if I was traveling with a boy that I liked and I was a Christian, I would feel like, oh my gosh, I need to not feel these feelings. But there's no discussion of like, oh, I'm feeling like impure thoughts. It just gets avoided altogether because the author isn't really sure how to deal with that. So the language, the attitudes, the priorities of the characters feel very sanitized, missing the nuance and the complexity that define our teenage years. It avoids the confusion, the identity crises, the societal pressures that often teens are experiencing that are messy and complicated and nuanced, but they don't align with these tidy moral narratives of typical Christian fiction. So they either get overly sanitized or just left out altogether. And you're left with this book that is portraying experience that is not really true to the teen experience. Another issue is that the story arcs are typically going to all be the same. Character experiences crisis, has some doubts, turns back to their faith, and faith in Jesus is the resolution, the end. Life is rarely so straightforward, and yet Christian fiction adheres to this pattern as if that's the story arc that your life is going to take also. So when a kid's experiences don't mirror that, they also start to feel either one like, this doesn't feel real, I'm bored of this, or they start to feel like, this doesn't feel like my life, that means I'm wrong, I'm messed up, and therefore I have more shame. There's so much shame in growing up Fundy, and the media that we consume only makes this problem worse. Struggles are resolved in ways that don't reflect long-term or the ongoing nature of real personal growth. In this absence of complexity and struggle, the characters end up being not people, but just vehicles for the adult author to deliver a moral lesson to a child. By focusing almost exclusively on the religious aspects of life, these books end up featuring teens as one-dimensional people, defined only by their faith rather than defined by the multifacetedness of being a person. Now, how can Fundy authors fix this? I don't know. I don't have an answer for them because I struggle to connect with what they're doing in the first place, to agree with what they're doing in the first place. So like as a reviewer, I don't know how to make your fiction better because I think your fiction comes from a place of being not good to teens. So I can't offer how to do this better. But until you guys stop writing everything like that, you're not going to sell very well. And what's funny is they think they don't sell well because it's like the world attacking them. And what's actually happening is just your fiction, your media is bad. It's poorly written, it's cookie cutter, it's uninspired, it's inhuman, it's robotic. And until you stop writing everything like that, you're going to continue to be less consumed than everything else. It's not about sex in media, selling. Sure, that can happen. But the fact is that your media is poorly done. And until you write something that feels as human as these other stories do, you will not sell the way these other stories do. But also you have to stop writing things intended to swindle a non-Christian audience into consuming your book and be like preached to, which is something that a lot of fundy authors just simply cannot do. They feel this like great moral urge to get people to read their books only for their books to be overly preachy. So like one author that has done this, whose like books are marketed as just fantasy and YA books, is Nadine Brandis. And then people open them up and they're like, why was this low-key very preachy in a way that was not conveyed through the synopsis and the marketing? All right, so let's get into the actual review of this book. First, we get a dedication. This book is dedicated to all the brave Christians around the world. 1 Thessalonians 2, verse 2. But with the help of our God, we dare to tell you his gospel in the face of strong opposition. May you continue to be brave and dare to fight for your faith. Get a table of contents, and then we get another Bible verse. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave or forsake you. Now, this book is probably heavily inspired by this. Okay, I don't even know how to describe this to you if you did not grow up in Fundyland. In Fundyland, we have a very specific view on we are told a very specific narrative on what happened during the Columbine shooting, which Fundy Fridays has a video on Columbine, so do I, and I get a lot of comments from Christians who are very angry with me for talking about this. But the fact is that the Columbine shooting, as was told to me, was that there were these two boys who were out to kill Christians, and that they held guns to the heads of Christian girls and they killed them because they would not deny their faith. And this is something that we were taught and that we were told was something that could happen to us and that we needed to not deny our faith. And in fact, we were acting this out in our teen groups at school, or at church rather. I mean, many of you might have been acting this out at school, but that is what we were taught. What is actually true is that Columbine was a failed bombing. It was not about Christians. It was about taking out as many people as possible. The bombs failed. They went in with guns. They did ask one girl, "Are you a Christian?" She said yes. They said, "Why?" And she said, "I don't know. That's just how my family raised me." And that girl is still alive. But her story gets told as if it's these other two girls who died. But Christians refuse to grapple with this. They like the idea that the girls who died were the Christians and that they were targeted for Christianity because of Christian persecution complex. They love the idea that they are going to be persecuted for their faith. It makes them a victim, and it confirms a bias that they already have. It confirms a belief that they already have, that they are convinced that they are being persecuted on the day-to-day for being a Christian. Before I move on, I need to clarify that what I'm saying is very particular to the United States, which is why bringing up Columbine is so important to this, because we are talking about a phenomenon that exists in the United States culture where Christian nationalists believe that this is a Christian nation, but the enemy, which is the devil, wants to make it so that this nation is filled with people who want to attack Christians for being Christian. Okay, I am not saying that outside of the United States people are not persecuted for being Christians. What I am saying that in the United States, you are free to be a Christian, and in fact, it is quite easy for you to be a Christian, and you are not persecuted by your government. There are no plans to persecute you by the government for being a Christian on the basis of being a Christian within the United States. But if you disagree with them, like for instance, what's happening in Oklahoma with their superintendent forcing the Bible into classrooms for instruction, if you say, hey, I don't want my kid being instructed on the Bible, you can have a Bible in the classroom, but not for curriculum purposes, to teach Christianity as fact, that's a violation of my rights. They would see that as them being persecuted. Your freedom feels like persecution to U.S. evangelical Christian nationalists in particular, that group of people in particular, okay? Just so we are clear on exactly who I am talking about here. This is very popular in evangelical culture, and it also stems back to the idea of this Bible story surrounding Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, where they were three people in the Bible who were told that they needed to bow to a false god by a king called King Nebuchadnezzar. There's a VeggieTales episode on this where they have to bow to a giant chocolate bunny, I believe, or a golden bunny, and they refused to bow, and they were sent into the furnace, and they knew that either they would die or God would save them. They were put into a furnace and they did not burn. Christians believe that it is their moral duty to do that. And then when Columbine happened, it was like a new version of that. There's this whole song based on what happened at Columbine by Michael W. Smith that says, "What if tomorrow, what if today you were faced with the question, what would you say?" And the question is, do you believe in God, yes or no? Would you say yes even with a gun to your head? So this is what this story, Defier, is about. What are you willing to do when you are forced into a position where you're supposed to deny your faith? Our main character is Lennox, and she lives with her older brother Oliver after the death of their parents. This book is very heavy on repeating the same thing over and over in the beginning, but basically the whole first chapter is, at the age of 17, it was hard for Lennox to fully process the emotions that came with losing her parents the week before. The coroner had ruled her parents' deaths as a double homicide, but local authorities had no leads on who committed the crime or why. Her brother puts his dreams of being an engineer on hold to take care of her, and at the funeral, Lennox gets so upset that she runs to a silo on their property and just sort of sits. At one time, the barn was full of life and purpose, but now it was nothing except rundown and useless. The small, God-fearing Texas town was turned upside down, and she was turned upside down right along with it. Her sorrow would not let go of her. She did not understand why God would let this happen. None of it made any sense to her. Her parents did not deserve to die. She did not deserve to lose limb. Her father's words rang again in her ears. Tomorrow is not promised to anyone. That is why you must live every day like it's your last. That's highlighted. Who highlighted this? 1,000 questions floated in her brain. She picked out the one she needed answered most. God, where are you? A month later, she's getting ready to go to school. She has a dog named Grizzly who will come up towards the end, which is the only reason I'm mentioning it. And before school, her brother says that he has a job interview today. She says, "Good luck," and he says, "Thanks, but I don't need luck. God's got it." He seemed full of confidence. It seemed that his faith never wondered, and she wondered how he could so easily trust God after everything that had happened. So as we can see, the crisis of faith is going to be a main theme here. Unfortunately, it is so incredibly dull to read. She wanted to believe in God, but she had major problems, and she wanted answers in a major way. She needed to understand why her parents were dead and why God did not intervene. Lennox needed an answer from God to decide how she felt about him. The real problem was Lennox was not entirely convinced that God answered prayers, at least not hers. Lennox has two friends, Sky, who she has a crush on, this one guy, and Kira, who they've been friends, all three of them, since kindergarten. People always called them the unbreakable trio. They were inseparable, one for all and all for one. Sky was very protective of them both and would keep them safe from bullies during their playground years. Sky and Kira were the rocks in her world, a world that was like shifting sand. So a lot of fundy jargon is going to come up that is not common outside of Fundyland. So there's Bible verses that talk about shifting sand. There's a whole gospel song that says, "On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is shifting sand." So that's a line that is reinforcing, stuff that we're taught at church. Fundyland really has its own jargon, its own language, which I would love for somebody to study. There's all these different phrases that we use. Sometimes I accidentally use them in my vernacular, even after I've left. And I think I've caught myself in videos doing it. I'm like, oh, gross. I can't believe I used that. It talks about how she has a crush on Sky. Sky was incredibly handsome in her eyes, even in the casual clothes he always wore. She was wary of doing anything with him that might ruin their friendship. Adolescent feelings often changed quickly, so Lennox settled comfortably into the wait-and-see approach. And this is how you know that this was written by an adult who has not been a teenager in a very long time, because that just feels so incredibly not reflective of teen feelings. Kira knew of Lennox's true feelings for Sky. "Hey, Lennox, you ready for another day at school?" Kira always had words of encouragement. By the way, I think Kira is described as black and she's going to die. So that's kind of a choice. They are about to go to prom. Lennox went prom shopping with her mom before her mom died a month ago. She has a very hard time concentrating in school, but yet still graduates anyway. So this is sort of just like lip service, which sucks because I would love to see a teen book that actually talks about like struggling in school, struggling to pay attention. But then I think that we'd have to have a conversation about like ADHD, and Funnyland is very hesitant to talk about things like ADHD and even dyslexia. They really hate medication. My Fundy family is very weird about my kids on certain medications, and my family's very odd about trying to get medicine that will help my kid. I don't really want to talk about specifics because it's like not, anybody's business what my kid medically goes through, but just as a personal anecdote, that's something that like continues on even to this day in my family. And even though my mom is literally a nurse, so you can see how Fundyland really has a grip on these people, that they're even like scared of medication. And there are sects of Fundyland that are like anti-vaccination. Anyways, back at home, Kira drops off dinner to Lennox, and it says, with a grateful heart, Lennox took the dish and set it in the kitchen. Grateful heart is another very common Fundy phrase. And some funny phrases do get used outside of Funnyland. I'm not saying they don't. I'm just saying that they are ones that come up like on the daily, and they mean like a very particular thing, or they harken back to a gospel song, yada yada. So hanging out at home, the news comes up. By the way, this is set in the year 2030. This is going to shock you. It was written in 2017 and it is set in the year 2030. The projector reflected holograms all around as if they were in the same room with them, the newscasters. The date ran across the top of the light blue walls, April 25th, 2030. The reporters appeared and were broadcasting about current events in the States. America was in a fragile position and the government struggled to keep it together. Then the news turned to a subject matter that hit too close to home for Lennox. Police found new evidence in the unsolved homicides of Lennox's parents a month ago. The police chief spoke to Oliver about it, but it was entirely different to see the evidence played out on the news. A terrorist cell released videos of her parents' deaths. She was afraid of what this terrorist cell was capable of and furious at what they had done to her personal little world. They had destroyed it forever. Man, the writing really leaves something to be desired, I tell you what. That was really in a moment for like an emotional impact that you just didn't take. Apparently, a video has been released from a foreign terrorist cell who calls itself the Regime. The Regime is infamously known to attack Christians and others who oppose their worldviews. Now, it says foreign. We don't really ever get any more information on that. I don't know what it meant at all. All I know is that the terrorist leader's name is Ahab, which is a Bible thing. He was a king who worshipped false gods. The Regime is infamously known to attack Christians and others who oppose their worldviews. So I don't know where they come from or why, or what other countries they appear in, but it says that they're foreign, which, we just had to throw some xenophobia in there, but then it never says like where they come from, why they're doing this. We actually never get an answer for any of that. And the people who support them are United States people. So I don't know. There wasn't really a lot of thought put into this. Just like as a general statement, that's sort of where we're at with this book. Holograms of men whose faces were covered and wore the emblem of a snake coiled around a tree on their sleeves pulled Lennox's parents from the sidewalk and forced them to their knees. The snake in the tree thing, I assume, is like from Genesis, but we never get an explanation. She wished she had half their bravery, her parents. This is the video of them dying, which we don't really get told what happened. She did not understand why they were selected. Was it because they were Christians? If so, how could the regime know that they were? I just want to know why. There is no good reason, is there? Oliver said. She had to find out why her parents were killed by a terrorist cell. Maybe faith in Christ was too dangerous to hold on to now. And again, it says over and over in 5 different ways. All she wanted was to know why. It was as if her spirit and flesh were in a war zone choosing sides. So spirit and flesh is another Fundyland term. So your spirit is your soul and your flesh is like your physical body, including your brain. Your brain is your flesh is your entity that is full of sin and it will lie to you. And your spirit, if you followed Christ and are in tune with the Holy Spirit, your spirit will not lead you astray. That's Fundyland belief. I feel like if I don't explain these basics, then you're not really getting like all the layers here. I don't know how much you don't know about Fundyland, so I'm just trying to cover all of it so that you don't have any questions. One day at a time, I know God will get us through this. God, she murmured and tilted her head. Oh no, it came out more like a question than she had expected and knew it would cause Oliver to worry more about her. Lennox! Exclamation point. You can't think like that. Think like, what? All she did was say, God? Question mark? What the fuck? I can't help it. How could God let this happen? Lennox's favorite Bible story growing up was the one about the Hebrew boys who stood up for their faith and would not bow, not even under intense political pressure, not even upon threat of death. The Hebrew boys' unwavering trust in God led them to declare, God will deliver us, and even if he doesn't, we will not bow. Something about that story always resonated deep with Lennox. The story and its message was so deeply ingrained in her heart that she could not forget, even though she almost wanted to in the midst of her pain. Yeah, it's so deeply ingrained because it gets told to us like 5,000 times a week. We have to do how many fucking coloring sheets on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? See how Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego went in the furnace? Make sure you choose the furnace if you have to. Like, this is the shit they're teaching kids that are like 5 years old in Fundyland. Oliver, you just have to give me some time. Lennox, you have to fight for your faith. Sometimes it's hard, Lennox said. If you don't fight for your faith, you will lose it. Your faith is worth fighting for, Lennox. Is it? I'm not sure anymore, she said. Why did all of this happen? Why would the regime want my parents dead? Why hasn't God answered me? Is this how the end begins? Like, we're just repeating questions over and over. So she does end up praying, Lord, I'm scared. Please let these tribulations draw me closer to you rather than push me away. So this is like a very specific prayer that they want teens to learn so that when teens are experiencing doubt, that the teens will fall back on. And doubt is so common amongst kids. I mean, I had so much shame from all the doubts that I had. And that's why so much of their media is being like, see, they doubted too, but make sure you're like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. She knew that the Bible said believers would face trials of many kinds, but she wanted to know whether her trial was over or just beginning. And of course, her friends only seek to further enforce this. I know that losing your mom and dad is something you will never get over, but it is something that you have to get through. They would want you to live your life and fulfill God's purpose for your future, her friend Kira says. She decided to focus on living. We then, oh my gosh, this book takes so much time to like specifically point out details to us, but then not answer any basic questions about the villain and, you know, their intentions and their desires and why they're doing what they're doing. Kira puts makeup on Lennox, okay? Makeup was her favorite part. When they were little, she always begged Lennox to let her put makeup on her. Lennox usually surrendered and allowed it. She closed her eyes as Kira brushed on a shimmery gold eyeshadow onto her eyelids. Next came the mascara. Lennox struggled not to blink as Kira swiped her eyelashes several times with the black liquid. You see all this words? You see all that words? I feel like we could have erased all that and just said Kira was nice enough to put on some makeup on Lennox and use all that all that verbiage, all that wording, right? And put that in a conversation with the villain where he explains where he came from, why he's doing this. But instead, we just don't do that. Because why would we humanize a villain instead of just making a scary boogeyman for children to be afraid of and ask no questions about the hows and whys? Sure thing. This is why Christian media is so shallow. And this is why we grow up and we leave the faith, because all of these boogeymen that we're told exist are just people. And sometimes people do bad things and there's reasons. And I'm not saying like terrorism good, but I'm saying sometimes things are complicated, but instead they want it to be very uncomplicated. They want it to be, look at this foreign terrorist cell who came and harassed Christians. But they want you to believe that stuff so that you teach it to your kids. And hopefully in teaching it to every single generation, we remove everything until all that's left is Christianity. That's the hope of them. And of course, Kira is made out to be this like very one-dimensional person who you want Lennox to be like. Kira was more focused on having a relationship with God than she was with having a relationship with any boy. Kira had her fair share of boy drama sophomore year and made a vow to get her life right with God before getting involved with boys who made her heart stray from her first love, Jesus Christ. Lennox admired Kira for her unashamed faith in Christ and always thought she could learn a thing or two from her. So this is the hope in telling teens this, is that they will either be the Kira or be the one who aspires to be Kira. It's really normal to have crushes and want to kiss people that you have crushes on, but in Funnyland, they're like, no, because you need to set your eyes on Christ only. And the hope is that they will meet one person who their father will approve of, and they will get married, and that'll be the only person you ever kiss. That is, in fact, what my parents wanted for me. That is definitely not what happened. So they're at prom, and she's, thinking about this. Her parents loved it when Kira came over because they knew how much of a good influence she was on Lennox. This is just so shallow. And then literally 1 second later, the ambiance was rocked into oblivion by an ear-shattering bang. Like, literally, that's talking about her parents think she's a good influence, and then earth-shattering bang. Lennox gets really wounded, as does Kira. While the doctor doctors are trying to bring Lennox back to life. She goes to heaven or heaven adjacent. I don't really know. It doesn't really say. A choir of angel voices lifted in praise overtook the sound in her ears. It grew in her spirit, making her feel whole and complete. She sees her mom and dad, and it says she was about to ask them questions when they both simultaneously whispered into her ear the very same word. Their voices joined in unison like the brush of an angel's wing. Fight.
You gotta fight like hell.
They vanished. They returned to the air from where they came. Fight for what? Fight for my faith? Fight for them? I like how the first question she has is literally the answer. Fight for your faith. So she had died on the table. So, she had gone to heaven and then they resuscitated her. Oh, Kira's not dead. She's in the ICU and has not woken up yet. We have just learned that the terrorist cell called the Regime is responsible for the recent attacks at a hotel which was hosting a local school prom. A dozen students have died from the blasts that were set off at the hotel. Hundreds more are wounded and in critical condition. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the families of the victims. Thoughts and prayers, of course, the old staple. One moment she was a happy teenager with lofty goals, and the next she almost dies by the hand of the same terrorist group that murdered her parents. What was the world coming to? Why hadn't the government stopped them yet? So she tells her brother, I saw mom and dad. They said fight. That was it. That was all they said. I know we have to fight for our faith. I'm just scared that something bad will happen. Bad is all that seems to happen now. So Oliver says that is why we have to fight, so that we can change the bad. But fight against whom? Why? Why do these terrorists hate Christians? For what reason are they killing them? When you start to, when a fundy kid starts to actually interrogate these questions and learn the actual truth about things like Columbine, and they realize, oh, that wasn't about attacking Christians. I'm not actually in danger for being Christian in the United States. That's when it all starts to fall apart, because then they start asking the adults around them, why did you lie to me? Why did you need to lie to me to secure my faith? If your faith was true, if this was a good idea, if this was real, then you wouldn't need to lie to me to convince me. And that's part of where it all falls apart, is when you start to learn how much of this is just rooted in fear. That's really what made me lose my faith. Is I had to ask myself, why do you believe what you believe? And I said to myself, I'm very afraid of what happens if I don't. And so then I thought to myself, do you want to live your entire life believing something simply because of fear? And I didn't. And I had enough anxiety as it was. And I said, well, what happens if I just let this go? And I did. And now I have peace, finally. I'm finally at peace. I'm not constantly worried. And what's funny is fundies, including my own father, have popped up in my comments saying, you don't know true peace because you're not a Christian. And that's what they tell you, is you're never going to know joy. You're never going to know peace, because if you don't believe, then you don't have those things. I do have those things, and I only have them now because I let go. I let go of that anxiety, but they don't want kids to know that. She goes to Kira's room, and this part really disgusted me because it was so shallow and just awful to once again, we kill off a white girl has a black girl best friend who dies, and this catapults this death catapults the white girl into finally becoming who she needed to be. So in Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas, this also happens. So Kira's mom and dad are portrayed as yep, we see our daughter's dying. She watched as Kira's mom and dad leaned their heads on her forehead and gave her lifeless body a kiss. Kira's dad shook his head for a brief second and walked to the door to give Lennox permission to say goodbye. And I just feel like this is not how parents act when their daughter dies. If my son died and his best friend was at the room, I'd be like, you need to leave. I'm not ready for this yet. I would be holding my kid sobbing. That's how you actually act when your kid dies. That's my greatest fear. I would not be prioritizing some little white girl standing waiting to get her turn to kiss my kid. No way. And instead, the one who it says is hyperventilating at the loss is Lennox. Why did she live and Kira die? Lennox's heart wanted to harden again, but the vision of heaven would not let it. Fight. She would not let her heart grow callous. She knew Kira was in God's hands and that she was in that beautiful place. Gross. This is gross. It's so dehumanizing. She goes to church and the preacher says, sometimes we go through things in life and we don't understand why, but the important thing is that we understand God has not forsaken us. He will bring peace to the hurting. We do not mourn as the world mourns. We know there is hope after death. A still small voice, another funny phrase, whispered through the pain in Lennox's heart, I am right here with you. I have never left your side. Goosebumps rose on her arms. Something better waited on the other side of the struggle. She saw it. God showed it to to her. Only hope and eternal life eased her pain. It was worth fighting for. Faith was worth fighting for. She began to understand that now. Lord, forgive me for doubting you. Jesus, I need you. I can't do this without you. She hoped she could hold on to the resurgence of faith when she went back to the reality of her real life, where a terrorist group called the regime stole everything good away from her. They took her family, her friend, her safety, and made her question her God. Never again would she give them that much power. And the next chapter says, her heart still mended from both physical and spiritual wounds. Ah, yes, spiritual wounds. Anyway, her brother alerts her that he's going into the military, which means that the only person taking care of her is no longer going to be taking care of her. Lennox, the regime killed Mom and Dad. Psst, psst, Artemis, stop touching the ring light. Artemis! The regime killed Mom, Dad, Kira, and they almost killed you. I have to do something. I cannot sit back and pretend like I'm okay anymore. There have been too many attacks against people I love. I have to fight. I don't want to lose you, she says. You won't. God will watch over me. How long before you leave? Not long. They need recruits as soon as possible. I only have a couple of days. I made arrangements. Oh, he did say that he's sending her to go live with Sky and his grandpa. Oh. I missed that. I missed it because I realize now I was so busy laughing at this is not how joining the US military goes. It's like a whole process that takes months. And they just literally pick this dude up at his house in a Humvee. That is not how it works. That's not how it works in times of warfare. And I don't know how we would get from 2017, this being written, to 2030. The military picks you up at your house in the suburbs in a Humvee. Okay. I'm going to miss you. I will send hologram messages to you every week and I will be back before you know it. No, you won't. That's also not how the military works. You don't go back. You get stationed somewhere and it's normally not where you come from. When Carlos is in the military, the first place he got station was out of the fucking country. An armored Humvee pulled in front of the house. It looked out of place in her neighborhood, but with a war that threatened the nation, the military did whatever they could to get more boots on the ground. No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't send a Humvee. You know, the military has things called GOVs. If they were going to pick you up in your house, which they won't, they would send a Ford truck or one of these ugly ass vans or even a car. They have so many GOVs. Do you know how many GOVs your tax dollars are paying for? They wouldn't send a fucking Humvee. Tell me you don't know anything about the military without telling me. And it's not like I'm like, wow, I know so much about the military. I'm so much cooler than you. It's just these people think they know a lot about the military because they're so obsessed with the military, but in reality, they don't know how it works and they don't even think to Google. I actually told Carlos about this. I said, babe, I'm reading a Christian dystopian book that is set in 2030 and it was written in 2017 and this woman wrote this 17-year-old's brother, literally her only parent, deciding to join the military to fight the evil leftist rebels, and the military literally comes to pick him up at his house in a Humvee to join the military. And Carlos said, what the fuck? Straight to war? Yeah, he did. That's not how it works. You have to go through, you have to take a test, and then you have to swear in, sign a contract, and then you get sent to basic training, which you normally all get on a bus or a plane, or sometimes both. You go to a particular base that does training. So for the Air Force, it's in Texas. And then after you go to basic training, you go to training for your specific job. And then after that, you get stationed somewhere. That's how it always works for active duty. What the fuck? Straight to war? Straight to war directly from home. I'm talking Humvee pulled up in the fucking suburbs. But wait, there's more. The villain, an evil leftist villain group controlling the weather to fake climate change. And he said, I don't get why they have to bring politics into books. Making fun of the fact that all of book talk has been, reading is not political. And then before he leaves to get in the Humvee to leave for war, Mom's will said to give this to you on your 18th birthday. It was her locket, the heart-shaped necklace designed with the image of a sparrow inlaid in gold swung back and forth. It was the very locket her mother wore every day. Dad gave it to her mother as a gift in the hospital the day Lennox had been born. And inside the locket is her mom's favorite verse, which was, we walk by faith, not by sight. Thank you so much for giving it to me early. Oh yeah, and this guy joins the military with his dog. Grizzly was the smartest dog Lennox ever saw. The retired police dog never lost her training. Oliver got clearance for her to join the canine unit because he knew she would help in the fight. Lennox cuddled her one last time and buried her face in Grizzly's fur. This is not how any of this works. Anyway, this man and his dog jump in a Humvee to join the military. Okay. So she goes to live at Sky's house with his grandpa. His dad is in the military and is always deployed. He never comes home, which is true for some people. And his mom abandoned him. It appeared his mother left an invisible scar on his heart. Lennox could tell it still hurt him that his mom left him and that his dad was absent. We really overwrite things. His mom left an invisible scar on his heart. Lennox could tell it still hurt that his mom left him. We don't need to say both those things. I got it. Thank you. I understand. And it says he hasn't heard from his dad since a year ago. He had to stop all contact for a special op he was leading. I don't even know where he is. Which, over a year, that seems like, okay, I guess. That doesn't seem true from what I know about special ops, which isn't much, but I still feel like that's not correct. I used to babysit for a family whose dad was special ops, and yeah, he would like not check in for weeks, but a year, he would be gone for a year sometimes, but like he still could call. That's just, a lot of this is just like, I don't know anything about the military that I idolize. You can Google this shit. It's really not hard. Anyway, they're at Sky's grandpa's house and it says that they see fighter jets. I think they were fighter jets. How the fuck would you know? Okay. Fighter jets that flew out this far made no sense. The nearest Air Force base was over a city away. Did you know that not just the Air Force has fighter jets? Did you know that not just the Air Force has planes at all? Did you know that the Blue Angels are Navy? Like those are planes and they are not Air Force. Like it's not just the Air Force. Like a lot of bases have runways and airstrips and all that because it's not just the Air Force that has planes. Lord, give us strength, the grandpa says. Immediately, 2 more jets flew overhead, then another and another. She gets a message from her brother that says that the military is losing control of military bases. The regime has infiltrated his training facility and probably others around the world. I'm confused about this because as far as I know, every training facility, like basic training facility for the United States military is still in the United States. I don't really know what that means. He says there's a fracture in the ranks and some of our owners siding with the regime. Why are they siding with the regime? We don't know. We never know. What does the regime offer them? We don't know. We never know. He said the regime is going to start taking over entire cities and start building their own strongholds. And then she learns that her dad was not just a teacher and her mom was not just a nurse. Of course her mom was a nurse. Why is every funny woman a nurse or a teacher? They were a part of an underground organization called the Sparrows that fought for the rights of fellow believers in Christ. The Sparrows recently took a stand against the regime in foreign countries. That was why her parents were killed, for their involvement with the Sparrows. She read further and her hand gripped tighter around her locket. Yes, because we all know that fundies in the United States always back up Christians in other countries. Ask me again how much the fundies here in the US back up Palestinian Christians, which is to say, literally never. Now, maybe Christians outside the United States are, but that's because Christians inside the United States are so obsessed, fundies are so obsessed with the idea of nationalism and making the US a Christian nation. They don't give a shit about Christians outside. They give a shit about going to other countries and converting people in other countries to Christians. He says that the locket my mother left me has a microchip that could help stop the regime and that I need to take it to a place called Sparrow City immediately. Now, I don't know why her mom would wait to take this locket to Sparrow City and we never find out. This is just such a lazy way to write. And she's like, why would my mom leave something so important with me? If anyone should have something of such value, it should be Oliver. He could get to Sparrow City. Why her? Good question. That's a great question. We don't know. And it's not like her mom led this group, so why her mom had the microchip, we also never know. Mr. Connors, he said you would know how to help. I never thought I would live to see this day, the birth of the American Underground Church. Good grief. You are not oppressed as a Christian in the United States. I'm sorry. If you are oppressed, it is not because you are a United States Christian. If you're dealing with oppression, it's because of something else. You are not oppressed for being a Christian in the United States. Stop that. I have an old war buddy named Eli. He founded the Sparrows a very long time ago when he saw the persecution of Christians during our war days. What the fuck are you talking about? In the United States? Where? Point me to it. Point it out to me. That locket Lennox has is too valuable. She's not safe here. We walk by faith, not by sight. We walk by faith, not by sight. She thinks to herself over and over. This was her life now, a life no longer safe or sure. She felt as if the rug was jerked from under her feet. Everything happened too fast. She wasn't ready for it all to come crashing down. She was finally starting to mend. What kind of microchip was implanted in a locket? Why did her mom trust her with something so valuable? It was all too much information. It was all too much at once. Processing the information took up valuable time they did not have. I'm sorry, we actually did have time. We just wasted a lot of words, and I would love an answer for some of these questions, actually, if we could just get a second. No? Okay then, sure. The weakness of her flesh tried to take control. Sky's grandpa sends them alone to go see Eli, who says, you should know your parents are heroes. They gave their lives for others. They were helping to fund underground churches all over the world. We called it Operation Sparrow. Wow, how on the nose. Her anger and sorrow twisted with a hint of pride. She should have known that they died for a cause. She had no idea her parents were involved in such an operation and could not figure out why they did not tell her. You couldn't figure out that your parents were involved in such an operation? You didn't put those pieces together in the last scene? That doesn't really make sense. Why the fuck did you think they had that locket? What did you think was going on here? Maybe it was for her safety? Question mark. Of course it was. Now she knew why they were murdered. The microchip didn't give it away? We have been tracking the movements of the regime for quite a while. They have slowly taken over several foreign nations. Which ones? We don't know. Why? We don't know. And we knew it was only a matter of time before they reached here. There is a man named Ahab who is the commander of the regime ever since he rose to power. Rose to power where? We don't know. He has been targeting Christian countries. Which countries are those? Just so we're clear. Which countries are those that Ahab is targeting? Let's skip over the why since we're not going to find out. Which countries is he targeting for being Christian? Just a quick question. Because the United States is not a Christian nation. It is not. It has never been a Christian nation. It's not. Dan McClellan, who is a scholar on the subject of Christianity, has a good video on this, which I will link below.
So we will be issuing a memo today that every school district will adhere to, which is that every teacher, every classroom in the state will have a Bible in the classroom and will be teaching from the Bible in the classroom to ensure that this historical understanding is there for every student in the state of Oklahoma in accordance with our academic standards and state law.
This is a pathetic and a misguided attempt to deploy the Bible as an idol in open and knuckle-dragging defiance of the actual principles that undergird the foundation of this nation.
You can't just say things that are just not true. I mean, I guess you can, but you are incorrect. So which other countries are Christian nations that are getting taken over? We don't know. They're never named. See, I feel like I didn't do a good job of explaining what I'm talking about here, and I feel like I might be not conveying what I really mean. So when we say the words Christian nation, what fundies mean might be different than what you're thinking. Christian nation could mean, depending on your interpretation, a nation where there just happens to be a large amount of Christians. Now, when you say that, there's also the point of Christianity is broken down into different pieces. There's Protestantism, there's Catholicism, right? So evangelical fundamentalism is an offshoot of Protestantism. It's a very particular sect of Protestantism. And many of them do not believe that Catholics are Christians. I was explicitly taught this growing up. I assume that when the author says a Christian nation, she means a nation that is founded on the principles of Christianity or writes its law based on the principles of Christianity. Doesn't mean when she says that, her interpretation being a nation that is predominantly the main religion is Christianity, or the state has said that they are adopting Christianity as their religion. And if you were to ask this author, do you consider, let's look, Mexico a Christian nation? It is likely, because of the particular sect of Christianity that she is involved in, that she would say, no, Mexico is not a Christian nation because they are Catholic. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about a very particular definition of what Christian nation means. I feel like I need to be clear on that. Turning them into regime strongholds. How can he do that? Can no one stop them? He has numbers, so soldiers that will do anything for him, whatever cost. They've assembled a weapon. This is where I really started to lose it. They've assembled a weapon that can control the weather. It's called the Global Weather Simulator. Did you think that when people were saying that they thought that the hurricanes were manufactured, that was not rooted in like fringe beliefs already? Incorrect. There are groups of fundies who believe that the left is manufacturing climate change or manufacturing ideas about climate change in order to make people fear things and therefore vote a certain way. Every accusation is a confession. Climate change is not only a myth, it's manufactured. Why haven't we heard any of this on the news? Lennox said. I could only suspect they did not want to create public panic or mass hysteria. There's already enough civil unrest. The government is barely holding the states together as it is. 1 minute the land seems fine, and the next, terrible extremes. They have already demolished thousands of acres and have destroyed entire cities with fire, tornadoes, hurricanes, and tsunamis. See for yourself. They both watched in horror. The regime plagued the countries that would not surrender with what they call acts of God.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. Do you understand that?
Okay. People soon became climate refugees. Lennox would never forget what she watched. The voices crying out for help echoed in her ears. She wanted to help them, but she could do nothing. She hated the helpless sensation that invaded the depths of her soul. Your locket, Eli said. Your father was working on something that would bring down the regime. I believe he hid it in a microchip. In that locket. That's why you must go to Sparrow City. Was there no one else who could get it to Sparrow City? She trembled with uncertainty. Was she even capable of getting the microchip to Sparrow City? Lennox, you can do this. You have to, she thinks to herself. The necklace weighed heavy around her neck. As much as she wanted to hand the burden over to someone else, deep down she knew it was her responsibility. Why? It was her course to take and her burden to bear. Why? The only safe way for you there and the locket is by foot, but you'll never survive without gear. You need to stop at a Sparrow outpost. My daughter Cameron is at one about 15 miles from here and will give you everything you need. You should know that this man Ahab thinks he is a god. He is making everyone bow to him and denounce whatever other faith they are. Oh, so it's not just Christians that are getting persecuted? Are we gonna let the Muslims speak for themselves? What about the Jains? Hindu? Nobody? Just Christians? Okay, because like earlier you said that he was, targeting specifically Christians. And for the rest of the book, we're going to talk about targeting specifically Christians. No? Okay then. He has an anthem that plays every day at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. where he makes every man, woman, and child bow to him. Again, this goes back to like the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego story in the Bible. And he has no mercy to those who refuse to follow his command. And she sees a video of this where a woman refuses to bow, and when she fights back, she is killed. Tears fall down Lennox's cheeks as she felt her faith waver. No, Lennox, you have to keep the faith. Faith in Christ is worth it always. How were they going to prevail against such a force? How would she be strong enough? She felt so unprepared for everything. Well, yeah, because you're 17 and you literally are unprepared. I don't know why her parents didn't tell her about any of this. That actually doesn't really make sense because every single adult in Fundyland is constantly preparing us for having a gun to our head and having to pronounce our, to pronounce our faith if in case that ever happens. So like if my parents had joined a small cell of people who were dedicated to a cause when their Christian persecution complex fantasies were finally playing out in real life, they would have dragged me into that shit with a quickness. They wouldn't have kept it a secret. Please. My dad would have been thrilled to tell me that he got to be proven right. The Sparrows have been building Sparrow City for a long time now, anticipating this would happen. There is a team of scientists who have built up tech to withstand the GWS and attacks from the regime. It is a city of refuge for all who can make it there. All she had to do was make it to Sparrow City. I know you are young, but you need to know that when you serve God, to live is gain and to die is gain.
It occurs to me now that when people have the religion that I believe in explained to them, when we say to die is to gain, it does sound like a death cult.
Don't let the fear of the regime overtake you. Don't give them power over your faith. So they start on this journey to walk 15 miles to go meet Eli's daughter so that she can supply them with crap to go to Sparrow City. And on this trek, it says she had not fully realized how unstable the GWS made the climate. It disrupted the entire atmosphere.
Turn the friggin' frogs gay!
Just over 15 miles later, they reached the Sparrow outpost where their welcome was anything but warm. Stop right there, yelled a stout soldier. So the soldiers finally accept them, and Cameron, Eli's daughter, is like, I'm Cameron. If he sent you to us instead of straight to Sparrow City, you must be important. Her locket is, Sky says. This is very important. My father spoke about that locket. Y'all have hologram stuff. Why can't you just send each other holograms? I don't know. The sci-fi elements of this are, non-existent. We have been fighting for a long time trying to dismantle the regime. And she notices that all of these people have branded on their arm. The regime calls it branding. And the regime doesn't call it that. It is literally just called that. It is called branding. D for defier. If they choose to let you live when they capture you, they mark you with a D to show that you are defiant and that you refuse to give up your faith in Christ. They mark you with a D for
these nuts.
On the outskirts of every regime stronghold, they have prisoner camps where they keep all of the people who refuse to bow during the anthem. That is where they brand them. We were lucky enough to escape the prison with only a scar. It's important that you get that microchip to Sparrow City. It can change everything. I would take it myself if there wasn't another mission I had been tasked with. I can't afford to lose any manpower to help you. The mission my crew is tasked with is also too important to fail. I'm so busy and I have so many important matters to attend to. I must send two 17-year-olds to do this extremely important thing, but I have other important things that I won't name. What's more important than stopping the GWS? Why can't you go send these two teenagers who have no training to go do that? This doesn't make any sense. There was no thought put into this. You two are going to have to get it there by yourselves. Besides, they'll never expect two teenagers. So send people who look young, who are actually trained. But she doesn't. Here's a pack with survival gear and a first aid kit. I put MREs, meals ready to eat, in there as well. You can actually, if you ever get to a military base, you can buy MREs, though I don't know why you would want to. Some people think that they're like so cool. I think that that's like genuinely disgusting that people are so obsessed with the military that they'll eat MREs, which are like these vacuum sealed packets of food. I don't understand being so obsessed with the military. I think that's so cringe. But so we have like holograms in the future, but y'all couldn't think of anything other than MREs to eat. Okay. And then she also gives them something called a sapphire shield, which can withstand a firing squad. Oh, like my Ridge wallet. Well, I'm not sure if this is the bulletproof one. One of the Ridge wallets, at least, is bulletproof. And they also give her and Sky all-terrain suits so that they can be protected from the extreme weather that the evil leftists have, forced upon the masses on the world. It reminded her of what astronauts used to wear, just not as bulky. What do you mean used to wear? Are astronauts wearing something different in this world? Can you elaborate, for the love of God? And then she also gives them something called an adapter blade. Its molecular structure is designed to change to the exact tool you need when you need it. I'm pretty sure this never gets used again. So you have an adapter blade, but you're still eating MREs? Okay. You must first climb straight up the center of the Guadalupe Mountains, where the weather is being manipulated by the GWS. There are sleeping drones at the east and the west of it. If you try to bypass it and go around, you will wake them up and the regime will find you, or worse, the drones will drop bombs directly on you. And then there are the Prowlers, the result of a science experiment that Ahab ran. Their strength is not their greatest weapon, although they are strong. It's the psychological warfare they can play from a distance. They do not have to be right next to you to destroy you. If anyone crosses the line into their territory, the mind game will begin. If you cross the line into their territory, they will try to steal your soul. They can only hold on to one person's mind at a time and can only stray so far from their territory, but don't underestimate them. How can they steal my soul? Lennox pondered silently, even though this is in quotes. Why did you put a... Oh my gosh, whatever. You know what? Whatever. So they leave and they go on a journey together, her and Sky, where they're eating MREs and they're hanging out, and there is no thought of anything untoward between them, despite them being teenagers with raging hormones. If they were actual teenagers and not written to be idealized versions of teenagers for this book, they end up in Prowler territory. Lennox had prayed this day would not come. Now she knew why the regime didn't need to station soldiers here. She would rather face 100 soldiers than one Prowler. He stared straight at her with his reptilian eyes. One lone Prowler, not quite human, but not quite beast either. He had the face and shape of a man, but he was something different altogether. So he mind grips her. She was sucked in. He had the ability to make her see the worst version of herself. Panic attached itself. Fears that were deeply hidden become reality and control her actions. She must face her darkest thoughts head on, alone. Fight, she thinks to herself. No weapon formed against me shall prosper. It's a Bible verse. Her faith in Christ was activated and her hope triggered. It radiated through her mind, freeing her body to move once again. So she gets away from the Prowler. She asks Sky, how long was I in there? You were in there for almost an hour. How did you break free? Sky says. Faith that God was with me. I had to find something stronger on the inside of myself than the Prowler's hold of me. Faith is worth fighting for. They run into a regime soldier who, it says his face is red with anger. His teeth were clenched. What am I supposed to do with you two? Why aren't you in a city? Why would they need to be in a city? Did the regime already take that much control? Lord, give us favor, even if just for one moment. I'm going to regret this. I know I am. I already do. Run before I change my mind. So they run from this soldier, and it says, Lennox compared herself to the soldier and contrasted how different their chosen roads were. This war made him almost as inhuman as the Prowler. What do you mean? You have not established such a thing. Stop that. The man inside who once had the ability to show compassion was gone. What the fuck do you mean? Where is this coming from? It was a miracle he let them go. You don't know anything about that guy. I have no idea why he joined the regime, what the regime's beliefs are. What are you talking about? This is so shallow. That could have been her or Sky had they not chosen to leave when they did. After her experience with the Prowler, Lennox never wanted to lose herself again. It was a terrible feeling. I can't believe what some men have become. I wanted to help him realize that he did not have to become a regime soldier. What do the regime soldiers even believe? Tell me one time. I can't stand to see people lose all hope. It's like they just gave up. Lose hope? And what do you mean? What do you mean? Our hope is not of this world. It's another Bible verse. We hope in something greater. Always remember that, Sky said. This is so contrived. They run into another kid named Ander, and Ander lost his group, which was a group of 4. They'd been on the run for months trying to find safety. He had run into a few sparrows, so he has an all-terrain suit as well. They told us about some kind of city of refuge called Sparrow City, but we kept getting lost and turned around when the weather changed. not the evil leftists, anti-Christians, forcing the weather to change and getting them all turned around. We are heading for Sparrow City too, and have a map. You can travel with us. Oh, good. It's like the Wizard of Oz up in here. If we only had a brain. Apparently, Ahab did not like that my city refused to give up Bibles at the mass book burning. Give up Bibles? Was it already that extreme? The burning of Bibles reminded her of Pop's words about the birth of the American underground church. She never thought there would be a need for such a thing.
Someone that you know and they ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into.
There is no Bible burning in the United States on a mass scale. There is no regime trying to take over the government and burn the Bible. In fact, the only people challenging the Bible, like for book banning, are people who are doing it to get back at and do malicious compliance, because people like Moms for Liberty are challenging books. And so the standards that have been set are so vague and open to interpretation that the Bible will meet the standard for what needs to be banned. So therefore, people who are part of like groups that are anti-Moms for Liberty challenge the Bible to prove a point. The regime has stolen everything from me and it haunts me. Do you still trust God? Lennox said. It was a constant struggle to have faith. 1 minute life was normal and in the next normalcy was stripped away. If his city was controlled to the point where the regime burned Bibles, she was sure her city was too. She had to trust God even more. I want to trust God, Anders said. Me too, said Lennox. So Anders, Sky, and Lennox decide they need to go into a city for supplies. I guess they're out of delicious MREs again, but they end up being out in the open during when the anthem plays. And they're like, man, we should have been smarter with our timing. No shit. The 7 a.m. anthem played over the intercom. One by one, people filed out into the streets. There was an ocean of tan jumpsuits. Is this a comment on Obama's tan suit? Are we being sneaky? Men, women, and children stopped what they were doing and bowed, all facing the same direction. Lennox thought of the videos she saw at the cabin, Eli's cabin. They were driven like moths to a flame. Whether out of fear or respect for Ahab, they all bowed. Sky is not there. He disappeared. And they're out in the open, and it's Lennox and Ander. And Ander, who she's known all for 2 seconds, is bowing, and Lennox is not. Lennox's eyes must have deceived her. Ander would never bow to a man who destroyed his city and stole his parents. You've known him for 3 seconds. What are you fucking talking about? She fixed her eyes on Ander. He refused to look at her. Coward. They had only just met, but she never guessed he was one to betray his faith. Well, again, you only just met, so. She was wrong. So she gets yelled at to bow. No. Her throat was tight, but her voice was powerful. Nothing compared to that moment. She was so vulnerable, yet she never felt stronger. Something sparked within, and she remembered in her weakness, God was made strong. She was more alive than she'd ever been. She felt a lion roar deep inside. Her faith in God was worth fighting for, worth standing for. Only he was her salvation. She bowed only to him. A terribly large man with a buzz cut and an enormous forehead came over. He bore a scar that ran over his face. Frozen with a permanent scowl, he was not happy with her. His huge fists were curled into balls that looked like hammers. His fists alone looked like they could do a whole lot of damage. He charged closer, the smell of tobacco as he breathed the words onto Lennox's face. What did you just say? I said no. She heard gasps in the crowd. That the last time they saw someone standing during the anthem was probably months ago. If you wanted to eat, you bowed. If you wanted to live, you bowed. Bow, you stupid girl. She makes sure that her locket is hidden away under the tan jumpsuit that she stole, to try to run around in the city and get food. You are under arrest for being a defier of the regime. You will be punished according to your crime. People shook their heads at the stupid girl who stood for her faith in Christ. They knew that it could be them too if they dared defy the regime, but they did not see it as a good enough reason to be labeled a defier. However, Lennox knew her eternity was at stake. She would not throw away her confidence in Christ so easily. Yeah, so the belief here is if you deny your faith in Christ, you're going to go to hell. So if you have a gun to your head and you're like, well, do I believe in God or not? If I say yes and I die, I'll go to heaven. But if I say no and then I also die, I'll go to hell for denying Christ. Isn't that terribly manipulative and gross to do to a child, to teach children that? Don't save your own life. That's what they teach fundy kids. The regime's soldiers were brutal, but she did not hate them for it. They were pawns on a chessboard. They were puppets to a regime. Their cruelty was a representation of what they were commanded to do. They feared standing up to the unjust acts of the regime and Ahab. Fear made them do unspeakable things. Fear made them into cowards. Why? What do they believe in? Why would they stand with Ahab? What do you mean? You have to actually establish these things. So she gets thrown in jail and there's a guard there that's about her age. She learned she was only responsible for how she responded to his hate. This boy did not scare her. Their anger and hate would not define her. It would not shape her, and it would not break her. She had found her strength in her voice. Her hope was in something far greater. Her hope was in Jesus. She gave up her roller coaster faith and clung to the promise God gave her. The earth was temporal. What she strived for was eternal. Just repeating over and over. So we're doing like the pastor thing where we're repeating the same thing over and over. And often you'll find that pastors at your church, they will like reuse sermons that they've used before. They'll change a line or two, but they want you to believe what they want you to believe. So they're going to preach the same thing over and over. And that's what this book is doing. Instead of having been written to make a story, this was written to preach to you and to tell you what and how to think about when you doubt your faith. So of course it's going to reiterate the same thing over and over again. Instead of taking that precious time that we had here to do any sort of like normal character work, explain the villain. So you're the girl who stood, huh? You're pretty stupid, aren't you? All you had to do was bow, says the guard whose name is Thompson. So she quotes the Lord's Prayer to ease any fear that tries to rise. This was not I wasn't taught to quote the Lord's Prayer when I was worried. I was taught to recite to myself the verse, whenever I'm afraid, I will trust in thee. Whenever I'm afraid, I will trust in thee, over and over and over again. God will deliver her. And then it does the entire Lord's Prayer, by the way. God would deliver her from this evil, but even if he hadn't, he was still God and he was still good. She reminded herself that God was her strength, that was trusting him with the even if he doesn't kind of faith the Hebrew boys had, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That they didn't give in, and neither did she. So again, we're just reiterating the same things over and over. They had to do like hard labor. There's a bunch of prisoners. There's so many prisoners, and one was no older than 12. Oh, so we agree that putting children in prison is wrong. If you would like to read about a child who was put in prison, you can read the book about her own experiences that Ahed Tamimi wrote. She makes friends with the 12-year-old child prisoner who's a little girl. It's explained to her that there are trackers in all of the food, which, okay, fine, whatever. She doesn't want to eat, but she has to. My parents were taken away a few months ago, says the 12-year-old little girl whose name is Clover. I got to stay with my brother who's older, but when the regime raided our house, they found my mother's journal hidden under my mattress. It had Bible verses in it. Instead of protecting me, my brother surrendered and gave me up. They took me, and I've been in here ever since. Yeah, okay. What kind of vile person gives up a 12-year-old little girl? My brother is Thompson, so he's the guard. So her own brother is a guard. Lennox is like, well, we're family now. She then gets branded with the D for these nuts, Defier. And not long after this, she finds out that Ander is now part of the regime. He has joined as a soldier. Coward, hypocrite, enemy, and traitor were the words that came to mind when Lennox saw him. Ander took Lennox by the elbow and led her out of the gate. The black fatigues he wore tortured her. How could he already be a regime soldier? That's what I'm saying. He already went through training. I guess their setup makes as much sense as like the setup of the U.S. military in this book. So he forces her to go talk to Commander Ahab. I'm Commander Ahab, head of the regime. So you are the one responsible for my parents' deaths, she said. Ahab noticed and stood abruptly her necklace, and he rips it from her neck. Did he know what the locket was? Maybe he only wanted to get a rise out of her. Whatever his intentions, it did not matter. He grabs her by the wrist and then slaps her on the arm where her brand is. That's about as much as this book is willing to write as far as like torture. Lennox's leather satchel hit the table and its contents spilled out. His hand lingered on the Bible. He slammed it on the table. Don't you know this leather-bound book is a relic and illegal to have in your possession? If it is a relic, then why are you so afraid of it? This is very common where the fundies believe that we're just afraid of the Bible, like atheists and people who are not Christians are afraid of the Bible. I'm not afraid. I read it. I have one laying around in here somewhere. Maybe it's downstairs. I'm not getting up and look for that thing. In fact, there's still homework in it from when I was in 7th grade. Like, that's how old my Bible is. There is Bible homework from 7th grade in my Bible inside of my house from my Bible class where I learned about evolutionists. That's a word they actually use. I'm not afraid of it. I just don't believe that it's an infallible true thing anymore. I just believe that it's a interpretation of a religious text that some people have religious faith in. Deny the words in this book or you will be my prisoner forever. You can imprison my flesh, but you will never imprison my soul. The Lord frees my heart every morning. He comforts me and protects me every night. God has not done a good job then, has he? You're a fool, girl. You'll never be set free. Your faith will be the death of you. My faith's what makes me alive. Tell me where Sparrow City is, and maybe I will let you live. And she's like, oh, he hasn't seen the map in her bag. And I'm like, wow, he is really stupid. This is the worst commander of a regime that I'm not sure what it stands for ever. Fine, how about your way? I'm going to let you live so you can see the rest of your world fall. I have only just begun ripping your world apart. I won't stop until I've broken you and it completely. Why? For what? We don't know. Give her 10 lashes for her sedition and throw her back with the others. So I thought that we were going to see the lash scene. We did not. We breezed right on past it. I think Ander carries it out, but we don't know for sure because we don't actually get that. This book refuses to do anything super taxing on the body, like even portray it at all. I think the author was like really afraid of writing gore, which again, this is one of those constraints where like often fundies will be like, how much can I actually write? Better to just leave it all out. She thinks about Sky, and it says, her feelings for Sky flooded her brain. They were muddied and confused. She loved him and she despised him at the same time. How could he leave me behind? She thinks that he abandoned her. She notices that Cameron, who was the person who gave her all the, astronaut suits to march through the terrain and all that shit, her and some of her crew got captured. She's like, hey, he stole my necklace. Ahab did, so we have to get it back. Convenient that they all ended up at the same prison. They started planning an escape, but Ahab learns about it and he sends them all into a chamber where they are gassed, but not to death. They are gassed with something that makes their lungs not able to withstand oxygen. How the fuck this works, I don't know, but they have to stay in these chambers, or if they leave and breathe oxygen, they will slowly die. And of course, while they are experiencing this and they all pass out only to wake up and be fine as long as they stay in the chamber, they're like, singing hymns and stuff. And who shows up to save them and give them inhalers that fix this problem immediately? Sky! He found Ander and forced Ander to tell him where Lennox was. They apparently got in a fight and he got the keys from Ander. And then they make a plan with Cameron where it basically like, everything that we have done up to this point has been useless because Cameron's like, I'll just steal back the locket and I'll go fix the weather device. And that's it. But they also need the map so that they can get to Sparrow City. They're about 28 miles away from Sparrow City. She assumes that by now Ahab has read the map and knows where Sparrow City is. And instead of us being involved in the action with the global weather system happens like off page. So what was the point of all of this? Nothing. We didn't write a cohesive, normal plot that, makes sense for what we're doing, like doing actual action on page, because the point wasn't to write a good story. The point was to preach. And that is consistently the problem I have every time I read fundamentalist evangelical media, especially that written for children by adults. Lennox hoped Cameron would disable the GWS and get the locket back in time. It was the only way to ensure the climate was safe for everyone. Yeah, okay. That's the way to make sure the climate's safe. Stop the leftists, evil anti-Christians. They hoped to avoid all unwanted surprises. Traveling deeper and deeper in the woods, they barely saw the orange globe in the industrial city. The lights flickered in the distance and then completely disappeared. The city was on fire. The blaze echoed crackling noises through the woods. How does a blaze echo something? The crackling noises can echo, but how does the blaze itself do that? That sentence doesn't make sense. Cameron and the Sparrows must have shut down the GWS. I'm gonna be honest, I have no fucking clue how those things relate to each other. In the next chapter, somehow the regime has reenacted reactivated the GWS, and they cause an earthquake where Lennox and co are, and they're about to like fall through cracks in the earth when Lennox is saved by a dog. Her dog, Grizzly. Yay! The one that got accepted in the military after being kicked out of the police force. Grizzly's been through it, always working for the man. I'm sorry, but ACAB includes Grizzly. She knew that if Grizzly was here, that meant a good chance that Oliver was too. Grizzly sprinted off to help others. Her canine training taught her to pull people to safety on her own. Thank you for telling me that overtly. I couldn't pick that up on my own. She sees her brother. They're so happy to be reunited. And then they're being shot at by Ahab and company. And of course they don't have all the supplies that they were given because all that's just fucking gone. Ahab's on a Humvee yelling over a speaker, hand over the girl who stood and we will not give you not one but 4 of your men. And it's Cameron and the other Sparrows. Sky and Oliver are like, Lennox, don't go. Don't hand yourself over. She tells Sky she loves him. And Sky's like, I love you too. That's why I can't let you do this. Oliver says, Lennox, you can't. They'll kill you. Besides, they could never break into Sparrow City even if they knew exactly where it was. There's a force field that only Sparrow Tech can pass. Y'all have a force field? Why didn't you use that on the other cities? And she says, that doesn't help, Cameron. That doesn't help, Cameron. As if she's talking to Cameron. She's not talking to Cameron. She's talking to Oliver. What she meant to say is, that doesn't help Cameron. As in, that force field doesn't help Cameron. But of course, there's just Poor writing. Grammatical errors. What do we care? This is written for teenagers that we're just trying to preach to. It didn't help the sparrow Ahab just killed. Oh yeah, Ahab shoots and kills one of the sparrows. And she's like, it's my fault. I didn't keep the locket safe. People are dying because of me. She remembered a verse about how there is no greater love than a man laying down his life for his friends. It gave her strength. So she gives herself over. Ahab releases Cameron and the other 2 living sparrows. Lennox was in God's hands now. And she's like, hopefully, the sparrows can get out of here and disable the GWS. Again, who the fuck knows what was on that microchip? It's not like we learned about it. And it says that a clear acrylic cage housed around 5 prowlers on the back of the Humvee. I'm not sure what the fuck I'm supposed to be picturing here. So she ends up being put in a cage with 5 of those creatures that invade your mind and make you feel doubtful about yourself. She had to surrender to Christ completely. He would deliver her, and even if he didn't, he was still her savior and deliverer. Faith crawled through her veins like fire, keeping her on her feet. She closed her eyes so that she could really see with her spirit. She envisioned Christ was in the cage with her. She was learning how to trust like never before. Jesus Christ was with her, just as he was with Daniel in the lion's den. He was with her the same as with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. When the prowlers realized their psychological war was ineffective, they came at her with their physical strength, but that failed as well. It was as if a radioactive explosion took place within the cage. Lennox opened her eyes and saw the prowlers debilitated on the clear floor. Without warning, the walls of the acrylic cage shattered, and the acrylic daggers flew toward the regime. Ahab fell to his knees in the grass in disbelief. He let out a haunting scream with his hands on his head and his fingers pulling out his hair. "Kill her! I want her dead!" Sparrows from Sparrow City had arrived. A ladder fell from a helicopter in front of Lennox. Bullets flew. Drones chased. But they were incapacitated by Sparrow technology. And then, I don't know how, but pieces of the earth start fitting back together. And I guess it's just Jesus doing magic. She watched in amazement at what she knew was the work of the Lord. With man, this was impossible, but with God, all things were possible. And there was a floating pathway made of earth to safety. And when the last defier crossed the floating pathway, the stones fell back into the earth's cavity. And so then they're in Sparrow City, and someone named Easton welcomes them. And she's like, "I'm Lennox. Oh, I know who you are, girl who stood." They were finally safe. They had anticipated a city of refuge, but what they saw was beautiful. People of different races and backgrounds came together as a unified front in the name of Christ. Oh, so you guys didn't accept all of the other religions, or you made them deny their faith so that they could join with you in the name of Christ? Got it. "How do I become a sparrow?" she asked. "You make a vow on confirmation day and then you train. And then that's what I'm going to do." The day came. It was confirmation day. She raised her right hand and placed her left hand on the Bible. Faith was a reason to fight. She realized that now. She wanted to be part of something bigger than herself. She made her vow. "I, Lennox Grace Winters, do solemnly vow that I will support and defend the cause of Christ against all enemies, and I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Lord Almighty." This is the thing that you say when you join the military. It's just twisted to make it sound like it's for Jesus. It's all enemies, foreign and domestic, I'll protect against, blah, blah, blah. "And I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Lord Almighty. I acknowledge his sovereignty, and I will give him glory all the days of my life until my last breath." And then we just skip to, it was the last day of Sparrow training. Sparrows in full combat scenarios fought holograms of regime soldiers. For some reason, Sky is just now meeting Easton. "I'm Sky, nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you." I don't know why they didn't talk to Easton in this entire time that they've been training, however the fuck long that is. They're doing training, and it says, "The glowing blue ammunition showed through the barrel. These guns do not bring death but judgment. The blue liquid delivers the same pain the recipient has caused others. It immobilizes them so that we can put them in prison where they belong." And I don't even know what the fuck that means, to be honest with you. And she's like, I'm finally a sparrow. She finally realized that life was more than flesh and bone. She finally realized it, because I'm pretty sure that we have reiterated that several fucking times now. Faith in Christ had turned her fate around. Her training was only the beginning of her new journey. She would train her hardest. She would get the locket back, and she would fulfill her purpose. She would fight. The end. Oh, wow. What a story. What a great time that we just had. Good fucking grief. I don't even know how to end this. It's just this is just another bad Christian dystopia where they're like, we don't know why the bad guy did this, because if I have to think about it, then I might actually agree with them. So let's just make it so that there are no stakes and that the villain has no priorities and doesn't say why they're doing all of this. Okay? Okay, don't think about it. Don't think about the man behind the curtain kind of thing. When you're writing a story, the whys are very important. But when you have a shallow understanding of views that differ from yours, that's the only way that they're going to come out in your fiction. You have to really understand your villains in order to write them well. And unfortunately, it's much easier for them to just believe that everybody hates us because we're Christians. The why doesn't matter. The how they do this doesn't matter. Their actual beliefs doesn't matter. What matters is I'm a victim, and I'll just write a story based on that, which is just bonkers. Like, what a shallow way to view the world and different types of belief. But they're not evangelical fundies unless they have Christian persecution complex. I am going to continue to review books written by evangelical fundies more and more now after the election, because I think that people really don't understand how dangerous this belief system that I grew up in and with is, and I would like to share that with you all so that you can have an understanding of these people who are very much trying to take power in the United States and make you live by their ideas too. But I'll also read books by Christians who aren't like this. So if you have suggestions for Christian authors, you can leave them down below, because I will read both, fundy and non-fundy. I still maintain that The Magician's Nephew is a great book. I still like that book, and that's written by a Christian. Now, do I have problems with him outside of, his The Magician's Nephew? Sure. But I still maintain that was a good book written by a Christian. It's not like I'm attacking Christians for being Christian. Like, that's a very shallow way to view things. Things are nuanced, and when you have no nuance, you tend to write books like the one I've just reviewed. Anyways, that's all I have time for today. Thank you so much for watching. Leave your comments and questions down below, and if you made it this far, leave a bird emoji for the poor sparrows down below. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye. Okay, before I go, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons, and those are Alexander, Ashley H, Astra, Brittany Bobitney, Call Me Kodiak, Cami, Choco's Homesick for Taiwan, Chris the Horror Therapist, DJ Rocktopus, Ellie, Emerald Dodge, Aaron with 2 E's, Eric D, Jess, Joel White, John E, K, Kaleno K, Casey McKenzie, Kate W, Katie M, Quinn, Lady Kittybug, Lady Chips, Lauren K, Lemon Jelly, Lex, Lily B, Matteraptor, Max B, Melissa, Minby, Mixer Boneless, Alice, Peggy Luhu, Rain, Reese, SJ, Samar, Scarlett, SMK, Steph B, 3 Raccoons in a Trench Coat, Urchin Audrey, White Raven 13, and Zorvictia. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend. And I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Potato Starch Marxist patrons, and those are Alejandra, Alicia Needs a Nap, Alistair, Althea, Amanda D, Andy, Angelica, Artie the Ninth, Ava, Ballads and Bookends, Beck, Bly Lavender, Bookish by Jenna, Bookish Rabbit, Book Noodle, Bree Caitlin, Kate B, Caitlin P, Carlin, Carly, Casper, Kate W, Catherine, Kathy, Claire Online, Cole, Colleen, Corwin, Cosmic, Darius, Danielle, Darren, Desiree Michelle, Dilf Enthusiast, Dorothea is not like other girls, Drive By Thinker, Evie, Emily A, Emma, Fiona, Francis, Gadarn, Halia Artisan, Hannah C, Harpy Kuro, Helen P, Harissing, H. Rissing. Oh my god, you're gonna have to tell me how to say that. I'm so sorry. JM Tennant, Jay is on Olympus, Jelly V, Jello Salad, Jen Michelle, Gender Queer, Jenny G, Jessis Sue, Jill, Jojo Bookish, Juicy Wizard, Kathleen, Catherine, Katie L, Katrina, Kaylee, Kayala, Kendra, KMTB, Laughing Cat Dog, Laura is Angry, Lauren G, Lazarus Ray, Library of Scars, Lindsay, Lisa, Lisa L, LP, Lou Siri, Lustful Octopus, MK Martin, Maddie, Madison, Man-Eating Plant, Megan, Malara, Mentally Unwell, May, Mima Who, Molly, Myth Lesbian, Never, Nicole G, Nicole R, Paige P, Pandemonium, Paul, Penelope, Penny Chilling, Foxglove, Plague Carrier, Pandemonium, Queen Cereal, Rachel B, Reba, Rebecca, Rebecca R, Rhea S, Ronnie, Rosie Thorns, Rowan, Sikoria, Saintbringer, Sakia Lume, Sarah H, Sarah the Bear, Sarah Z, Shamed, Shannon, Sean, Sophie, Stardust, T. Delegati, Talia, That Nerdy Mystic, This Is Not a Trap, what a name, Tiana, Too Thick to Work Today, Trash Can Teddy, Triple M, Tito Phoenix, Unicorn Jenny, Waves, Wobbs, Writer A. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend.